YouTube, live on Facebook. I think we're good. Let's take just a moment to check everything though, make sure we're good. Seems like we had some technical issues yesterday. Want to make sure those are not a problem right now.
Everything's good.
Everything's good?
There, yeah.
Okay. Let's do this. This is video 3 and Learn NLP, and this is the final video in this series. If you've been here for all 3 videos, that is amazing. Thank you so much for tuning in. If this is your first video, welcome. Glad to have you. If you want to see the other 2 videos, they are available. I think Facebook probably produced the best quality videos so far, so you might want to check it out on Facebook. If you're on YouTube right now and you look at the older videos, we definitely had some technical issues there. So that aside, let's get into this. If you don't know who I am, my name is Damon Cart. I live in Santa Cruz, California, which is where NLP was created. I'm originally from New Orleans, and I've been doing NLP for about 6 years now. And I've been teaching it for about 5 years. And NLP Gyms actually started as a practice group and then turned into a business. The other thing I want to say is if you're offended at all by me selling anything or cross-selling to something, I'm letting you know right now, yes, I will be selling something. I am selling something. So if that offends you, you might want to leave now. You're welcome. You're welcome to stay though if that does offend you. What it is an NLP online practitioner training. I'll talk more about it later. It's something I'm very excited to be putting out there because it is the most detailed, most comprehensive NLP training that I've ever come across. And that I did it that way on purpose because what I noticed in the several NLP trainings that I've been through as a student is that you're often not getting the whole story when it comes to NLP and NLP technology. For marketing purposes, institutes typically shorten practitioner trainings, sometimes down to 7 days. I've even seen as short as 3 days. There's no way you can learn NLP that fast, especially the technology has grown. In the early days of NLP, back in the 70s and the early 80s, NLP trainings used to be 30 days long at sometimes. In that time, the technology has grown and gotten better. And also these institutes have shortened their trainings. I wanted to do something different. I didn't want to just be another NLP institute putting another short NLP practitioner training out there telling people, oh, you'll get certified in just a few days, you'll know NLP, you'll have mastered NLP in 3 days or 7 days or even 20 days. I really wanted to do what they were doing in the early days and put all the upgrades in there. So I did a 24-day live training and I created an online training out of that, and that's what I've opened the enrollment for this past Saturday. It'll be open until January 20th, at which point it will close, because with my students, I go with them through the NLP journey. I do live coaching calls on our closed Facebook group, and I answer your questions. So I go with you, and I don't want people just kind of coming in randomly. So that's why I open enrollment and then close enrollment. So enrollment's open for 2 weeks. We got about a week left, and then I will close it and we'll take this NLP journey together. What I want to talk about today is taking back control of your reality. A lot of us feel like we're walking through the world, our reality, we go to work, things happen, and we respond to those things. And it's true, a lot of people are actually living life reactively. You're living life as when the things happen to you, then you just respond to them or you react to them. With NLP, what you can do is you can start to understand how you're creating reality. And when you understand that, then you start taking back control of your reality. It's not that you take control of everyone's reality, it's just your reality. But you only know your reality. So when you start making these changes, it will feel like the world around you. It will seem like the world around you is actually changing. And this is quite extraordinary. And the reason for this is because everything that's happening to you right now is a subjective experience. You are not experiencing reality objectively. We tend to think of it that way. That's the intuitive way to think about it, as we're taking in reality and everyone's taking in reality and we're just sort of doing this thing. But no, that's not true. you are not responding to external objective reality. What you're responding to is your internal representation of reality. Take a moment to let that sink in. You don't respond to the reality around you, the information that's happening, objective reality. You respond to the internal representation of it. So you have a map inside of you. That map has been being created since you were born. And that map is a construct of what reality is, because there's no way you could take in all of this information all at once and not filter it and not create a map out of it. You have to delete, distort, and generalize information so that you can understand it, so that you can make decisions, so that you can make good use of the information. And if you think about what a map is, a map versus the territory that the map represents. And there's a presupposition in NLP that goes, the map is not the territory. We want maps because they're convenient. You can look at a map, you can hold it in your hand, you can pull it up on your smartphone, and it can tell you where to go. You can't do that with the actual territory. The territory is just way too big, too vast. So with the convenience of a map, you can find your way through the territory. And you're doing that already. You're doing that inside, internally. So you take in information through your 5 senses, and it goes inside, and you construct a map about reality. And by the time you're an adult, you have a pretty solid map going there. You can make changes, but a lot of times the core of that the core of that map has been created. And in that map are your beliefs, your generalizations, your experiences. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, everything that I'm saying is not true. Okay, let's back up and let's address that. If everything I'm saying is not true, then how is it that some people are happy and some people are sad, and they live in the same reality? If you're thinking that objective reality, there is this objective reality. If that were true, then if I'm happy and I'm successful, and you're living in that same reality and you're not happy and successful, how is that possible? And we know this is true. We know that some people are happy and successful, and we know that some people are not. You can go to say a music concert, and you can be standing right next to someone, and you're in the same time and space, almost the same space. You can't be quite in the same space, but if you're standing next to each other, you're almost in the same space, you're experiencing the same time together. You could be having the best time of your life, and that other person could be miserable and thinking this is an awful experience. So if you're in the same objective reality, how can that be possible? It's because you're experiencing subjective reality. You're experiencing your subjective reality. And how we filter that is through our 5 senses. That's where it starts. And then after we take this information and we start creating generalizations and beliefs about that information. And once we start creating these generalizations and beliefs, when we take in information, they get filtered through these generalizations and beliefs. So if I believe I'm a poor person, I can win the lottery, and then in 10 years, which is actually true for 50% of people who win the lottery, in 10 years I'll be more broke than I was before I won the lottery. Why? Because my outward circumstances might have changed. I might have got millions of dollars dumped on me, but my beliefs about money, about who I am, in my relationship to money, basically, and this is usually unconscious, gets rid of the money. Because if I believe I'm poor, if I believe I'm broke, if I believe I don't have money, and there's money in front of me, I will find a way to get rid of that money. That's just one way. Same goes for some of the topics that I brought up, is your health, weight loss, whatever it is. If you believe that you're a person who is unhealthy or who is overweight, and then there's a certain point you don't want to fool yourself. And this is where I have a problem with the law of attraction and affirmations. You don't want to try to convince yourself something's not true that is true. Then you've got a new problem on your hands. But if you believe at an identity level that you're, say, like a fat person, or you're an ugly person, or you're a broke person, you will find ways to make that true. That's what I mean by it. Now, we have to accept reality. If I'm 200 pounds and I start telling myself I'm 150 pounds, my unconscious will have to reconcile that. And in reconciling that, it can be destructive. I'm not going to get too much into that. That's a kind of a different video. What I want to show you is how you're constructing reality. And most of the time, we're working off of visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Now, of course, we have two other senses. That's taste and smell. But we don't use those as much to make decisions and internal representations, unless it's coming to unless it's something about food. Of course, when you're talking about food, then taste and smell are a big part of it. But the reason you're probably here watching probably doesn't have to do with food. You're probably wanting to achieve something or create something. So most of the time we're working off of VAK. I'm just going to put feeling. And the reason why I'm going to put feeling, so hopefully we have some people who have some NLP training or knowledge or understanding. One of the big things where I see NLPers who are even in advanced trainings don't understand, they don't differentiate in the kinesthetic, the difference between tactile touch, proprioceptive movement, like I can close my eyes and I know where my arms are, that's proprioceptive. And then there's the evaluative feeling, the feeling that I am enjoying something, or like I see something, I hear something, and I say, oh, that's great, I like that. Or I see something and I hear something and I say, I don't like that. That's an evaluative feeling. Because I meet NLPers all the time and they say, oh, yeah, I'm really kinesthetic. And it's funny, I'm just like, we're all kinesthetic. Anytime you make a decision, anytime you have an opinion about something, anytime you like or dislike something, that comes from an evaluative feeling. We call that kinesthetic, but it's not the same as touch, and it's not the same as proprioceptive. Some people are very kinesthetic or tactile, or they're very into their bodies. Athletes are usually very proprioceptive. They have to know how their bodies feel to know that they're doing the move or whatever it is that they're doing correctly. They have to actually feel in their body what it's like. So you take in this information through your five senses, and then you represent it or represent it in this way. So I'll give you an example. When I say the word chair, how do you know what I'm talking about? I have Nick here, so when I say chair, how do you know what a chair is?
Because I've seen a chair in my past.
Okay, so he says he's seen a chair in the past. Okay, so he went to the visual. He said, I've seen, and I watched his eyes move so I could see that he actually saw a chair. Now, some people, and I like to do a show of hands, but well, you could actually put a comment there. Some people may have felt the chair that they were sitting on. So if you felt the chair, just put felt and write a comment there. If you saw a chair when I mentioned the word chair, go ahead and put that in there. And if you heard a chair, which I would say is pretty odd even for auditory people, but that might be the case. You might hear a rocking chair, or you might hear a chair sliding. That could be the case. So if you heard a chair, or you heard the word chair, or you visualized the word written out, put that in there in the comments. This is how we're able to process language and information rapidly. Because when I say the word chair, you didn't have to go into your head and look up in your internal dictionary and look up the definition of chair and say, okay, a chair is an apparatus that you sit on and on and on. No, you immediately had a visual or an auditory or a kinesthetic representation of a chair.
Looks like most people were visual.
Most people are visual, yeah. In this culture, in American culture, most of us are visual. In other countries and other cultures, they tend to lean on different modalities other than visual, but Americans tend to be very visual. Did anybody get anything else besides visual?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So now we can get a little bit more into this, and we could say, well, what chair did you see? Did you see a particular chair that you saw that you maybe in your home, or that you had when you were a kid, or did you make up a chair? So let's put that in the comments. Did you make up a chair, or did you remember a chair? Somebody put something here. Somebody wants me to talk about telepathy. That's not really in the realm of NLP.
There's another question that's kind of related.
Sure.
Can NLP be used to overcome procrastination?
Yes, as soon as you stop thinking of procrastination as a thing. And because, okay, let me get back to that question if we have more time, because it's a really good question. And so what I would add, well, let's do this. I can turn it into this. For everybody watching, we've all had the experience of what we call procrastination, right? So when I say the word procrastination, how do you know what that means? What do you see, what do you hear, or what do you feel? Now again, when I say what do you feel, don't say, well, I don't feel like doing anything. No. That's that evaluative feeling. What do you actually feel? Do you feel lethargy? Do you feel like your body just, you can't support the weight? Or, that would be more of a feeling. We're not talking about emotional feeling or evaluative feelings. So when I say procrastination, how do you know what it is? I'm going to ask you, Nick.
Sorry, can you say that again? Answer your comments.
When you hear the word procrastination, how do you know what it is?
It is...
Well, how do you know it?
What you need to do isn't aligning with what you want to do.
Okay, so he's giving me content. He's giving me an explanation, but that's not really what I'm asking you. What I did notice, though, is your eyes were looking over here. So what were you seeing? And so it was unconscious. He's looking at me funny, like, what are you talking about? So think of the word procrastination, about what it means. Look back over here where you were looking before, not too far, a little bit higher. So there's an image there somewhere that you were looking at. Do you find it?
Mm-hmm.
And what is it?
A book.
So he sees a book, and that lets him know what it reminds him of what procrastination means. So this is his internal representation of procrastination, just like the chair. So the problem with procrastination is it's not really a thing. Okay, I'm going to write it out for you.
Another example, Happy by Default commented, when I think about procrastination, I feel guilt and stress, or she's feeling.
Okay, so that's the evaluative feeling. What do you see or hear, or tactile feel, or proprioceptive feel before you feel the guilt? So that's what we're getting at. This is really key.
Someone said pressure against the chest.
There you go. Now you've got that's like a real feeling. So then after that, after you see your representation of procrastination, which is a book, after the other person, I don't know your name, you feel the pressure in your chest, then comes the evaluative feeling. Oh, now I feel bad about myself. Okay, so these things happen, this happens rapidly and it happens unconsciously. And this is how you can start to take charge of your reality again. What happens before? What do you see or hear that makes that happen? Now, feelings don't just come out of nowhere. Feelings don't just happen randomly. I know it seems like that sometimes. That you're just going through life, nothing different is happening outside of you, nobody's saying mean things to you, nothing bad has happened, and suddenly you start feeling bad, or suddenly you have a negative feeling or a negative emotion. And we kind of just think that that's normal. We kind of just think that, oh yeah, that just happens sometimes, like, I just feel bad. No, there is an unconscious process that is happening that was probably triggered by something else. So like, I could say something like, Nick, that's a nice shirt you got there. And something about the sound of my voice, something about the word shirt reminds him of a shirt that he had when he was a child. And then he has this shirt when he was a child. And then maybe he stained that shirt and your parents punished you for it. So you have this really negative emotion attached to that. And this all happens unconsciously and you have no idea that just by me saying you have a nice shirt, that there's this chain reaction of an unconscious process that leads you to a negative feeling that you had when you were a kid. That's how this stuff works. And it happens so unconsciously that we think the feeling is just completely random, and it's not. So anytime you have a negative feeling, you can walk this back and find out what really caused it. And so when you understand what that is, what is the visual and the internal visual, auditory, and kinesthetic that created that, now you're conscious of it, and if you're conscious of it, now you can change it. So you can go in and interrupt that pattern and replace it with a better pattern. So that when somebody compliments you on your shirt, you can even still remember your childhood, but you resolve that feeling. Because what happens is when you have a negative feeling, especially early in childhood, when you're in your formative years, and you have a negative feeling, what often happens is you don't want to feel that. So you push it away and you disconnect yourself from it. And then this feeling continues to exist in isolation and never gets processed. Feelings have to process for them to go away. But you're holding on to this feeling because you don't want to feel it, so you block yourself out. So it never gets to process, and then this part of yourself becomes isolated. And then as you go through life, you're going through life with this piece of you isolated, which limits you, makes you feel less whole. And now you start creating limiting beliefs from that. Now you have to go through the world pretending like this doesn't exist. So now your world is smaller, and if something comes in that contradicts it, you have to immediately get rid of that information because you're still holding on to this piece. One of the great things that happened for me when I was learning NLP is I started to discover all of these limitations that I had, that I was imposing on myself, all of these limiting beliefs that I had, and almost all of them were related to some sort of pain or suffering that I experienced in childhood. Well, I went back into that, understood what was happening, let that information process, let that feeling process, reintegrated with myself to gain back that piece of me. And suddenly the limiting belief was shattered and gone, and I replaced it with a much better belief. Making yourself conscious of how these processes work might be the most powerful thing you ever do and experience. And this is one of the things why you want to learn NLP and why you want to use NLP is to overcome these limiting beliefs. Before I get back to procrastination, were there any other questions that you were looking at?
No, not
Okay.
yet.
So let's get back to procrastination. So what is wrong with this word? So one of the things, the linguistic and neurolinguistic is incredibly powerful. The words you use, the words you use to represent your feelings, your beliefs, and how you use your words to project reality is when you start really learning the meta model, which was the first model in NLP, you really start to understand how your words affect you, your experience, and how your words affect other people. Now, this word procrastination is what in grammar, Nick? What is this word?
It is a noun.
It's a noun. Okay. But have you ever seen procrastination? Have you ever picked up procrastination and put it in your pocket?
Mm-mm.
Ever put procrastination in a wheelbarrow and walked it across a street or a yard?
No.
Okay, so is it the same as a rock?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so a rock is a noun though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how can procrastination be a noun and so is a rock? Doesn't make much sense. So this is actually it's a concept. But because in our language we represent it as a noun, which is a thing, how do you think that affects you?
It feels tangible.
It feels tangible. It feels like now I've got this like rock or this wall that's in my it's like an obstacle in my way that I call procrastination. So what do you think of something simple? Don't give me something like major. Something that you say that you engage in procrastination when it comes to whatever this thing is.
Calling a client.
Okay, so he needs to call a client, but you're engaging in procrastination, right? So if we change that word to procrastinating, so what am I doing here when I change it to this?
You're putting it in present tense.
Well, I'm putting it back into now it's a verb.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's a process, okay? So if I say that you're engaging in procrastination when it comes to calling a client, then just start to see and hear how you represent that. And then I say you're procrastinating in calling that client. What's the difference in the feeling?
I think that, I don't know, personally I still felt a little similar about the two.
Okay. Yeah, this doesn't solve it. What this does though is it puts the process back into it. So it should loosen things up a little bit. Okay, I might have to work with you a little more on that. So when you turn it back into a verb, now it's back into an action. Now it's a process. If it's a process, what can you work with something can you work easier let me back up. What's easier to work with? Something that is a thing or something that is a fluid process?
A process.
Exactly. Okay. So I'm not going to solve your procrastination problems and your procrastination problems and your procrastination problems right here. What I'm just letting you know is how changing the linguistics of what you say and how you even think about words in your internal monologue can change everything. Okay. So if I'm procrastinating, I can just stop and go do what I need to do, right? But if it's procrastination, now it's almost like it's a disease, or it's a chain that's over me, or it's something tangible that is holding me down from doing what I know that I'm supposed to do, right? So that's the linguistics. So how you're representing what your internal reality is, it affects what you're putting out there. It affects what you're projecting. It affects what you think is possible. So you can just go in there and change the language, and a lot of times that alone can change things. Not always. Sometimes there's other things that you need to change. So that's why it's neuro-linguistic programming. There's more to it than just language, but language is huge. Do we have any questions?
No, we had a comment from Sandra that was funny.
What's that?
She was just saying you were procrastinating is bad as well, but then she said like she gets it. She was just kidding.
Okay. 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 So let's do this. Let's have fun. How do you think about yourself? This is a big question. But when you think about you, what do you see? What do you hear? And what do you feel? And you might not feel anything in the sense of tactile or proprioceptive. Let's stick with visual and auditory. We don't want to exclude the auditory people. By the way, what's fun, so if you're truly a kinesthetic person, and I don't mean a person who just is emotional, that's not kinesthetic. Kinesthetic means that, I'll tell you how you can know kinesthetic people. They will tend to talk slowly. And unfortunately, other people think that they might not be so bright because they talk slowly, and that is not the case. Kinesthetic people are just as bright as anyone else, but they tend to talk slowly. My family tends to be kind of kinesthetic, and so I used to talk very slowly. And through practice, I changed that. But a kinesthetic person will often kind of hold their head low, and they'll breathe deeply. And what's interesting too is if I talk slowly to someone, what I'm doing is I'm slowing their images down of what I'm saying, and a lot of times they'll start breathing more deeply because they're accessing more kinesthetic. If you ask a kinesthetic person a question, they'll usually take a breath. And what they're doing is they're letting that information sink into their whole body before they answer. Now, why is this important? Well, I'll give you an example. This guy came into my office. He's a client of mine, and I wanted to make a sale, and it was I looked at his situation. What I was selling was incredibly appropriate to his situation. So the ecology was there. We talked about ecology yesterday. So the ecology was there, and I felt good about it, and I felt like he really needed this. Now, he was a computer software engineer, so he was two things. He was very digital, and he was very kinesthetic. He was very digital. Digital people, they talk to themselves a lot. They usually look down to their left. And when people are accessing the kinesthetic, they usually look down to their right. So digital people, you'll know them because they don't speak in sensory-based words. Everything will be, it won't be look, see, hear, feel, touch. It'll just be like neutral words, like he went to the store. It won't be sensory-based. So he didn't use any sensory-based words, and he kept looking down to his left, and he kept looking down into his right. So I knew what was happening. I would say something to him, and he would repeat it. So he would look, and I didn't hear him repeating it. He repeated it in his mind. So he looked down into his left and repeated what I said. Then he would look down into his right, and he was checking in with how he felt about that. And then he would go back into his left, and I could tell he was processing more information, like he was talking to himself. And he kept doing this until he would look up and then say something to me. So what I did was whenever I wanted to answer his question or present or lead him where I wanted him to go, I matched his process. I went down into my left and talked to myself. I went down into my right and felt how I felt about it. So he's watching all this, and I went back and forth a few times, and then I would look up and then I would answer him. I got the sale. And one of the reasons why I got the sale is because he felt familiar with me. I was matching his process. And I'm sure this guy, a lot of times, probably other people would think that he was unintelligent because he talked very slow, and the opposite was true. This guy was really smart, really, really intelligent. And so if people talk down to him, there's no way, if I talked down to him like he wasn't understanding what I was saying, then he would have shut down, he wouldn't have bought anything from me, for sure. The other thing, though, is if a person's very kinesthetic, they don't see images very much. I mean, we all see images, but we don't see it as kinesthetic people won't see as many movies and images. Now, a very visual person will. In order for a visual person to make sense of what you're saying, they will see images and they'll see movies, okay? So if you want to really irritate a visual person, talk really slow, because their movie they're making of what you're saying is now in slow motion. And this really irritates them. Now, if you're very kinesthetic and you were listening to me just now, you were probably like, yeah. Because very kinesthetic people like it when you talk slow. Because they want to take time to feel what you're saying. They're not so interested in seeing what you're saying, they want to feel what you're saying. So if you recognize that you're talking to a very kinesthetic person, so again, it goes back to what I'm saying here. They're processing information, their internal representation goes through their body. So if you slow it down, they're going to like what you're saying, and they're going to listen to you. If you do that to a very visual person, if you notice a visual person looks up a lot, and they'll talk, and they'll talk fast, because they're trying to keep up with their pictures and their movie. So they talk, and they'll go back and forth to looking at you and looking up. A kinesthetic person will look down a lot, and then look up and talk to you, and then look down. An auditory person tends to cock their head to the side and look to one ear or to the other ear. They'll kind of do this, and they kind of have like a lean in and a cock to the side to listen to you better. And their voices tend to be very resonant because they care about sound. They like the way sound sounds, so they're conscious of it. So know who you're talking to, and this could be for sales, this could be for therapy. If you're a coach, understanding who you're dealing with you'll have a huge effect on them. And this goes back to rapport, this goes back to ecology. It's the most respectful thing that you can do for someone, is to meet them in their reality and communicate with them the way that they want to be communicated to. All right, so before I move on, any questions? I'm throwing a lot of information at you guys.
A couple more compliments. Just love your explanation.
Thank you. All right. So when you think about you, and this might take a few moments. When you think about you, how do you know who you are? Now, the tendency here will be to go into content, to say, well, I'm so-and-so, my name is so-and-so, and I was born here, and that's not what I'm looking for. When you think of you, what do you see and what do you hear? Or do you hear anything at all? Maybe you just see something. So I'll give everyone at home a few minutes, or a few moments, not minutes, moments to think about that. Nick, what do you see or hear when you think about you?
When I think about me, I see me on a stage somewhere, playing music.
Interesting, okay. So would it be safe to say, now just knowing that this is super easy and obvious, but it's amazing how many people will miss this, you identify as a musician?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I wish everyone could have seen you. Like, he was just like, yeah, and he kind of lit up. So what I'm doing right here is I'm pacing him. And now we're already in rapport because I know Nick. But I would say that the rapport level just went up a notch because now he has a sense that I get him. This was so obvious, but you'd be amazed at how many people miss this. So him just telling me that he sees himself on a stage playing music, now, I know he identifies as a musician, and you probably identify more as being a musician than anything else in your life. Okay.
take.
Okay, so what else is there? What else do you see?
Well, I identify as a utilitarian.
Okay, so that's a
Which
little
is-
broader. So what do you see or what do you hear when you think of being a utilitarian?
I think for that I more feel happiness.
Okay, so that's what happens after you see or hear something. So what do you see or hear, or both, that lets you know that you're a utilitarian?
I see the lectures that I learned that I first was introduced to utilitarianism in when I think of the word utilitarianism.
So you see a teacher giving a lecture. Okay. So how does that let you know that you're a utilitarian?
That's kind of just been a long philosophical road for me.
Okay, so now he's going back into content, he's giving me the why. I don't want to know that. I want to know, what are you seeing or what are you hearing that lets you know that you're a utilitarian? So this is interesting because he's not seeing himself when he says he sees an image of a teacher giving a lecture. So where are you in this?
I guess I'm seeing a utopia, like everyone, just a society where I'm happy and everyone around me is happy.
Okay, so we could play around with this a little bit more, but I want to get back to everyone here. So in the comments, just tell me briefly, what do you see or hear when you think about you? And this is where your identity comes in. This is very powerful.
Sandra writes, I don't consider myself a very visual person. Often she has a hard time visualizing. Okay. However, I feel more comfortable with faster speeches.
Oh,
and she's
sounds auditory. Okay. So she sounds auditory, but this is hard to tell because we're just going by a comment. So when you think about you, Sandra, if you're hearing something, which could be your voice, someone else's voice, it could be music, it could be anything, and that gives you a feeling, or we could do it the other way. You could take that feeling and walk it back. Well, what did I see or hear that gave me that feeling? And that'll give you the clue of what I'm talking about. So now, this is very broad. This is very broad stroke. It would probably be easier if I contextualize this for you and say, in the professional context, who are you? What do you see or hear in the professional context?
Me?
Yeah, go ahead.
A business owner.
Okay, so what do you see or hear that?
I hear myself giving other people direction.
It's interesting. He switches to auditory. Do you see anything?
No, not for that one.
Okay, that's interesting. Good to know. So context to context, he shifts. So you might have experienced the same thing at home. Now, take what you're hearing. Okay. Now add the visual to the soundtrack. Now what do you see?
Me in an office.
Okay, so now we're bringing this in. Now, how much more real does it seem to you now that you brought in the visual?
It seems more real.
It seems more real because you're bringing in more information. The more information you bring in, the more real it becomes. Okay, so what I'm getting at here is we can create an ideal you right now that you will move toward. Okay, it's not going to solve all your problems. This is a fast and dirty way to work in NLP. So let's do this. Now, if you can think about your biggest limitation, the thing that holds you back the most, anything that you want to overcome, go ahead and think about that right now. And think about how you know that happens.
Should they be commenting on this?
If they want to, especially if they have questions. So think about the thing that you want to change the most in your life, because you're not happy with it. Okay. Now, I don't want Nick to expose all of his dark, dirty secrets because I'm sure they're really bad. He's a 21-year-old college student, so I'm sure it's awful. So I don't want to know these things because I want to sleep well at night. So I want you to think, though, the thing that you want to change most in your life, and we'll give it a letter just to refer to. What letter is that?
F.
We'll just call it F. Okay. Now at home, be thinking about the same thing. Think about the thing that you want to change most in your life because you're not happy with it.
There's an example on here if you want
Sure.
to use that.
Yeah.
Introversion.
Okay, so you're an introverted person, and so there's so many ways to go about that. Okay, but let's stick to this. So you're an introverted person. How do you know? What do you see or hear that lets you know that? Now, I'm going to pretend like I'm reading your mind. I'm going to pretend like I know. I'm going to pretend like you probably see yourself in a situation, in a social situation, and actually you don't see yourself because you're in that situation. You probably are first person perspective. Think of a situation either that has not happened or a situation that happened in your past, and you see people around, or you see a situation in which you would want to be extroverted, you'd want to be connecting with these people, you'd want to be communicating with these people, but you're not. And you see this and hear everything that's going on first person perspective. So it's like you're there, okay? Now, when you think of F, is it similar to that, or is it a first person perspective?
Yeah.
Okay, that's normally what happens in this situation. Now, what I'm building here is what we call the swish pattern, and this is I did a video on this. It's actually probably one of my most popular videos, and it's before I had a lot of practice doing videos, so I'm surprised at how well it's done. So that's what in that video. It's called "How to Do the Swish Pattern Properly." Is a much better example to follow to do everything just perfectly. But like I said, we're going to work fast and dirty here. So most likely, if there's a situation that you feel compelled, like if you're in a social situation, you want to be extroverted, but you're compelled to be an introvert. You just don't want to do. You're too afraid to connect. Most of the time, you're in a first-person perspective rather than seeing yourself. Okay, so when you're experiencing or when you're thinking about F, your first-person perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we're going to do is let that go. So all of you back home, hopefully you've got that visual and auditory that you see or hear, or both, of you experiencing what you don't want to experience. Okay, now let that go and create an image. I'm going to put hair on one side of the head because I know there are men and women watching this and I don't want to discriminate. So create an image of yourself, an ideal image of you in no particular context, and you're not doing any particular behavior. And some people ask, should I do just my face or full body? Whatever the ideal image of you, however that would show up. Would it be a full body? Would it be just your face? Would it be chest up? Whatever it is. So think of the ideal image of you, the you that you want to become, the you that has already solved this problem of being too introverted or being F or whatever your situation is. So imagine the ideal you. See yourself as the person who has already solved this problem, but you're not in any particular context. Like, I don't want you to be on stage. I don't want you to be doing anything. And for the person who has the introverted thing, I don't want you to see yourself socializing with anyone. You just see you, and no particular situation, and not performing any behavior or doing anything. You're just there. But when you see this image, there's something about it. There's something about this image of you that lets you know that you've already taken care of that you've solved that problem, that you've gone past it, that you're creating the life that you want. And it might help to tune it up by making it brighter, making it more colorful. You can add sound if you want, you don't want to put sound in there that then makes it context specific. So if you're hearing people in the background talk about work, then that puts you in the office. You don't want that. But if some music helps, then go ahead and put music in. If the sound of the ocean helps, I like the sound of the ocean, go ahead and put that in there. Well, actually, don't put that in there. That brings you back to the beach, so scratch that. So you can have sound or music in the background, but nothing that will put you in a particular context. All right, so I'm going to imagine that you've got that. So when you see this image of yourself, it's so compelling that it feels like it wants to suck you into the image. Like you want to be that person so bad that it feels like you want to jump into the image. That's how compelling you want this to be. Okay. Now let that go. Bring back the image. Let me back up too. If any of you are having trouble visualizing, do what I just did with Nick and take the auditory or the feeling and then turn it into an image. You can do it. Turn it into an image so you know what it is that you don't want and you can see it. It's much easier to work with visuals than it is to work with sound or kinesthetic. So turn that into a visual so you know what you don't want. When you have that in front of you, then take the ideal image of you and put it right below it, okay? And what you're going to do is, as soon as you see you engaging in the behavior or whatever it is that you don't want, first person perspective, that should be this image here, immediately swish up this ideal image of you and put it in front of you so that this is where you want to go, okay? Now let that go. You don't want to swish them back. If you swish them back, then you're going to have this yo-yo effect, okay? So bring back, don't swish up, just make the image of what you don't want to do appear here in front of you. Here's the image of the ideal you that you've created. And then when you see yourself start to engage in the behavior that you don't want or being who you don't want to be, swish. Hold that and then let it go. Okay, well, don't do that. Don't throw it away. Just let it go. Got to be very careful what I do with my hands because people might actually follow that and do it. So just let it go. Release it. Okay, one more time. So bring up or make appear what you don't want. And put the ideal image of you here and swish. Okay, let it go and do it 3, 4, 5 more times. Some people need more practice than others. Okay, so go ahead and do that. I'll give everyone a few moments to do it.
13 minutes left.
13 minutes left? Okay. We'll do this for about another 3 minutes and then we'll answer questions. Okay, so how do you know this worked? Well, it works whenever you see the thing that you don't want to do, that image, that first person perspective of what you don't want to do, and as soon as you see it, the ideal you pops up. That's how it should work. Now, for some people this is really easy. For some people it takes a little more practice. For some people they need more guidance in doing that. So like I said, we're working fast and dirty. We're doing this live. So I can't answer everyone's questions. So just know that it works whenever you see that image and immediately your ideal self pops up. Now, why does this work? Well, because you've just reprogrammed your mind that when you go to enter the reality of what you don't want, you then put up what you do want. So let's say I'm a procrastinator. Somebody had that problem. And say I procrastinate whenever I want to go exercise. So what I do instead is I binge watch television, okay? So that's what is preventing me from doing exercise. So the image that I would have is of me sitting on my couch watching television, and I would be first person perspective. And so then I would take that and I would swish up the ideal me. So next time I go to sit down and binge watch television, this image of the ideal me pops up. That's very compelling. And so now I say to myself, well, wait a minute, I don't want to watch TV. I want to go become this person. And so I will take different actions. I will engage in different behavior to become that ideal me. This sounds extraordinarily simple, but sometimes extraordinarily simple is what works best. It won't work for everything because you may have some really deep-rooted limiting beliefs, and sometimes we have to go in and rewire those and change those. But in general, if you have a very compelling image of who you want to be, and you have that front and center in front of you, you're most likely going to take actions and engage in behavior that will get you to become that person. A lot of people have very negative images of who they are, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You can think about people who have negative images of themselves because they think that will motivate themselves to be better. It sounds logical, it's not. When you see images of yourself in a negative way, or engaging in behavior that you don't want, you tend to just feel bad and do nothing, okay? So create a nice, ideal image of yourself so that you know who you want to become. It's important to know where you want to go, who you want to be, and what you want to do, and focus on that. It can help sometimes to know what you don't want and who you don't want to be, but you want to focus on who you want to be. Now think about this. If you're always focusing on images, or you have a lot of images about who you don't want to be, or who you are afraid to be, and fear often does that. Fear will make us focus on what we don't want or who we don't want to be. What do you think happens? you tend to become more of what you are focused on. And the reason why that happens is your unconscious, well, let's say as humans in general, we seek clarity. We will avoid confusion as much as possible. We want to avoid chaos as much as possible. And we'll do that to the point of keeping ourselves in a bad situation for too long. So if in your mind you're seeing constant images about who you don't want to be, naturally your unconscious is going to move in a direction of who you don't want to be, because there's clarity there. Not because your unconscious wants to be that, but the clarity is better than the confusion and the chaos. So you will naturally gravitate to who you don't want to be. So it's very important that you program images in of who you do want to be, so that naturally you gravitate to that person, who you want to be. You have
a question. So I believe they were talking about the swish technique.
Mm-hmm.
It was happy by default, who asks, it also helps to have the image of a mentor model, correct? She's kind of asking, like, can you replace your image with somebody that inspires you?
I wouldn't do that. And here's why. Because, and this is, I run into this from time to time, and I'm usually brutally honest about me and the problems that I've had, the problems that I've overcome. I've fallen into depression twice in my life, and I tell people this because I don't want people to emulate me. I don't want people to think of me as a guru. I want to pass on tools and information to you to help you live your life, not to become like me. I'm not an example of who you want to become. Some of my habits, some of my understanding, some of my knowledge, yes. But I want my students to focus on who they want to be. So what happens is when you start to emulate mentors, you also tend to pick up their bad habits. You tend to pick up their shadow. I mean, we all have shadows. A lot of the gurus, especially NLP gurus, try to project this picture-perfect image of they've used NLP and solved all of their problems, and they don't have a shadow or anything. Complete nonsense. Believe me, I've gotten close to many of the top NLP trainers in the world, and one of the reasons why I don't really hang around with them much is because when you start to get close to them, they often want you to get further away, because then you start to see the truth about them, which is that they're just human, and we are all human. So the person who's saying about the mentor, that sounds like a technique that probably some NLP trainer taught you or suggested, or something you read out of a book. I would say don't do that. I would say imagine yourself, the ideal you, and there's something when you see that ideal you, there's something about it that lets you know that you have all those qualities of your mentor. The qualities, not all of the qualities of your mentor, but all of the qualities of your mentor that you want. None of the shadow or the negative qualities, okay? So don't become your mentor. Don't become people you admire. Become the you, the ideal you, who also possesses those great qualities that your mentors and your teachers possess. That's what you want to do. So I would say no, don't do that. Any other questions?
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
For the unconscious, breaking down your processing that you were mentioning much earlier in the video, is there a technique that people can do to like start getting better at that? Because that seems like something that would be difficult to like connect yourself back.
That's learning NLP. So yeah, I wish I could give you one technique, one process that would fix it all, but no, it's not. What you're talking about is almost the entire study of NLP. That's why I've created a practitioner training. If you want to be able to do that, if you want to be able to break down or make conscious your unconscious processes and go in and intervene in those processes and create better processes that serve you better, that's what taking NLP training is all about. That's what this practitioner course is all about. It's about understanding how you process information consciously and unconsciously, so that you can go and change it, so that your automated programs that you've been creating since you were a kid are no longer running you. You're running the program. You're running the programs. You understand what's going on. So you're not on autopilot anymore. You're not just experiencing negative emotions and thinking that's just how it is. You're not just not succeeding at the things that you want and not understanding why. No, you can go in and figure these things out. And that is the tools that I offer in this practitioner training. All right, we got 5 minutes. Be happy to answer any more questions while we're waiting. I want to talk a little bit more about the training, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about the training. It is an online training. It's based on a 24-day practitioner training, which I don't think any institute has done in the past decade. And a lot of people told me, don't try it, it's not going to work. Not enough people are going to show up, and it worked. Enough people showed up, we pulled it off, and along the way I created the online training. That is what the NLP Gym Ultimate Online Practitioner Training is. When you purchase the online training, you also get access to the live Facebook group, well, the closed Facebook group where I do live group coaching about twice a month. You can post your questions. I will get to your questions. Other people who are already in the community will often give you their perspective or answer the questions to help you out as well. And that's the thing. You're not doing this alone. You have support of not just me, but you have support of an NLP community through Facebook, and that is an extraordinary help. It's something I didn't have when I was first learning NLP. Also, if you sign up by Saturday, this coming Saturday, you will also get a bonus coaching session with me one-on-one. This won't be a group session. I will do this with you like over Skype or whatever video chat works for you. And so that's an extra bonus. That will go away after this Saturday. You'll still have a week though to enroll in the program, and then after that week, which is January 20th, enrollment will be closed. A lot of people have been asking me, will I open enrollment again this year? And the answer to that question is I don't know. I have other projects on the horizon, and if I can fit it in, I will do it. If I can't, then I'm not.
So we got a question here. What is the connection between NLP and law of attraction?
Oh, okay, yeah, I mentioned I wanted to do that. So the visualization process that I just showed you has some elements of what like law of attraction is, where you think about what it is that you want and then you attract it. So the problem with law of attraction, there's not a lot of practical tools and applications for law of attraction. It's more philosophical, it's more conceptual, whereas NLP is more technique based and process based. I used to study philosophy, I used to study non-duality, I had a non-duality teacher. And I love philosophy, and nothing against philosophy, and I love non-duality. I think it's one of the greatest, I don't know, thoughts or mindsets or ways of thinking. It's hard to even pin down what it is. But the thing that was lacking for me was practical application and techniques. I need tools, I need skills. Give me some tools, give me some skills, and that's what I found in NLP. Law of attraction, that sort of thing, it's the same thing. It's more like, oh yeah, just visualize it and it's going to happen. No, it's not. And there's another attitude with the law of attraction, and not everybody in the law of attraction has this. I know I'm not trying to put down people in law of attraction. I'm just saying it's lacking in a lot of what NLP can give you instead of that. But there's this kind of this mindset that the world is out there to give me all the toys that I want, and this is just not true. Like, oh, you know, the universe is here for me, for my abundance, for my wealth. And I've even seen people do law of attraction. They charge people to do like these teleseminars where it's law of attraction for winning the lottery. And this just blows my mind that people would spend money on this, and it's like, this guy has never won the lottery who's teaching the course. So why would you follow him? There is no practical application to winning the lottery, except buying as many lottery tickets as you can, but you'll go broke and you still won't win the lottery a lot of times. So what NLP will teach you is the practical, the logical of how this happens. Like, people talk about intuition, and what I tell them is that there really is no such thing as intuition. But if we want to call it that, it's you come up with a random insight. It seems random, it's not. There's an unconscious process there's a cognitive unconscious process that is happening. You're just not conscious of it. But it's the same as when you have a conscious cognitive understanding or insight. When it's unconscious, the only thing what happens is you suddenly become conscious of the insight, and you think that it dropped out of the sky or that it's divine. And this can get you into a lot of trouble. So what NLP does is give you the logicals and the practicals and the techniques. So yes, visualizing what you want helps, but you need to do more than that. And NLP is just loaded with techniques and tools and skills to do that. Anything else? What time are we at?
We are at 1
o'clock.
o'clock.
Wow, right on time. Okay, if you have any more questions, feel free to continue to put them in the comments here in the video, and I will get to them hopefully. And again, remember to sign up for the practitioner training. Let's do this NLP journey together. Your NLP journey starts now. Have a great week, everyone.
Can't get my finger.